Good afternoon and welcome to the professional development session for today. We are honored and pleased to have Michelle Papiana presenting with us today about stress management. We are delighted to have Michelle joining us. Thank you for being here, Michelle. I believe you can take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Judy. I'm very pleased to be here today and to talk to everybody a little bit about stress management. As Dr. Judy alluded to, we are getting into that most wonderful time of the year when we are nearing the end of the semester and the holidays are coming upon us. So this is hopefully a timely discussion that will give you some tips and tools to help you make it through this very stressful time of year. So I wanted to start the session by asking you, what stresses you out? So I've got a little list here. People would be the number one, even the ones we like stress us out, right? Even the ones we like or love. But certainly work and school can stress us out, friends and family, traffic and parking. I know parking is always fun for us, and I think I had a few choice words to say to some people on the way down today. But I won't share those with you. Health, finances, others. So if we could hear from everybody, if you want to speak up or if you want to put some ideas into the chat room as to what your stresses are. And by the way, what stresses you doesn't have to be negative, right? Even positive things in our life can stress us out. But the key is to identify the specific sources of your stress so that we can then develop the strategies to reduce that stress.
And Lisa has already stepped in and
Awesome.
said money.
Money, okay,
Yeah.
so that would be under finances.
Yeah.
Definitely. Not enough money, too much money, differences of opinion about money, right? So if one of the biggest sources is people having different opinions about money. Okay, any others that people would like to share?
And know that you're welcome to put something in the chat room. And also, Dimitri is our host, our moderator for today, and you can let him know if you wish to speak up, and he will unmute your mic for you.
Okay, we have a hand going up.
We also say Lisa is challenged with raising a teenage daughter.
Oh, absolutely.
That will do it.
Yes,
will do it.
Absolutely. All right, so we've got money, we've got the challenges of raising teenagers, and this participant over here, Judy.
Oh, Joanne.
Joanne.
Let us know. You can speak up or you can put it in the chat, whatever you'd rather.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Prioritizing projects that are, all of them are important, urgent and critical.
Yeah.
Right, so determining which fire is burning the hottest, the fastest. Absolutely. Yeah, prioritizing is definitely, because everything seems important, right? Right, so trying to figure out what's more important or what needs the most immediate attention. All right, so those are some pretty good ideas. So I'd like to move, and I'm noticing that folks' screens aren't moving as I'm moving. So I'm moving through the PowerPoint and I don't necessarily see, so I don't know if that's something that can be worked on.
So can we check to make sure that, because it's still showing her opening slide?
Correct. And I would like the participants to be able to see.
You're on slide 3?
I am. I'm on slide 3.
Okay, so bear with us for just a moment while we make that adjustment and welcome the additional people in here with us. I'm delighted to have you. Thank you.
Well, while we're hopefully getting our technical difficulties fixed, and it looks like maybe we are. Good. Awesome. So I'll just go back quickly for those of you who didn't see the previous slide. We talked about what stresses you out, and I had that little list there, and many of you or some of you identified with those issues and then added others. And I talked about the importance of being able to identify what specifically stresses you. So let's talk about stress and the stress response. So you can think of stress as any condition, either physical or emotional, that threatens homeostasis. That's what stress is. And for those of you who are non-science types and don't know what the word homeostasis means, it's actually derived from the Greek words for same and steady, meaning homeostasis collectively are the ongoing processes that our body continues to use in order to maintain stable internal conditions that we all need for our survival. So whenever we feel a stress, that can certainly threaten our survival. And so our body mounts certain responses to deal with that. Right, so the stress response gives us what we need to cope with our stressor. And stress is stress, whether we perceive that as quote unquote good stress or quote unquote bad stress, how we differentiate between eustress and distress. The body responds the same. So whether you just got pulled over by a police officer because you were speeding, that would certainly be distress. Or whether your child is getting married and you're preparing for a wedding, which would be a happy stress, that stress is perceived the same way by the body. Right? So I don't know if anybody wants to give some examples of what they think of as eustress versus distress, but you're more than welcome to speak up or put those in the chat boxes.
I will.
Okay.
Eustress.
Eustress.
Shopping for a 4-year-old or with a 4-year-old.
Yes, shopping with the 4-year-old, absolutely. Right?
Absolutely.
Fun times, but can definitely be stressful. Yeah. So in 1936, Hans CeL, an Austrian physician, developed what he called the general adaptation syndrome. Oh, got a little feedback there. And basically that discusses how our body responds to stress. And if you look at the chart, that's what he determined is that stress occurs in a variety of stages. So we see that homeostasis is our baseline. That's where we like to be. That's our normal, right? When we experience an acute stress, a short-term stress, we enter the alarm phase. And you see we have a slight dip in resistance, but very quickly the body mounts its resources in order to deal with that stress, and we can see our resistance start to increase. And then the resistance will continue to increase even if stress is ongoing until if stress persists for a very long period of time, when it becomes chronic, then we enter the exhaustion phase.
Yeah.
And that's where we start having real problems in terms of our emotional health, and our physical health. Right, so that's basically the
So an example of exhaustion stage would be like what?
And we're going to talk about that.
Okay,
So
great. Thank you.
no, not
Sorry.
a problem. So I'm going to actually talk about those 3 phases.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So in terms of how we respond to stress, so the acute phase or the short-term phase is also known as the alarm phase, right? And this is where our initial response to the stress, and this basically gives the body what it needs to cope with our emergency, to deal with the short-term changes in our environment. And this is where our sympathetic nervous system is activated. How many of you have ever heard of the fight or flight response?
Oh, yes.
Right, hopefully we've all heard of that. And that is the response of the sympathetic nervous system. And primarily this comes from the stress hormone epinephrine, also known as adrenaline. Right, so we have a couple of different stress hormones, but in the acute or alarm phase, epinephrine is what dominates. But this is a good thing. Go ahead, Judy.
I was just going to say, Daniela has a hand raised.
Okay.
Do we need to open her mic and let her speak?
Sure.
She has to connect to the audio.
Okay, or Daniela, if you want to just put it in the chat room, then we can ask the question or make the comment for you. Either way is fine. It doesn't appear that you have a mic.
Okay. Should I continue?
Yeah, go ahead, and we'll let.
And when Daniela gets,
Absolutely. When you post something, we'll submit it for you.
So again, our short-term stress hormone, epinephrine, is going to dominate, and this hormone serves to mobilize energy resources and increase our energy consumption so that we have the energy to deal with the stressor. Right, so we see an increase in heart rate, an increase in blood pressure, our breathing goes up, stored fat, and we start to release carbohydrates into the bloodstream. We have an increase in mental alertness. We become more aware of our surroundings, and all of these things serve to heighten our awareness and give us the energy we need in order to respond to this short-term stress. So that's the acute phase. That's what we first experience. If stress starts to persist, then we enter what's known as the chronic stage. Oh, and by the way, if I go back for just a moment, a really good example of the alarm phase, so if you think of exercise, that's a very good form of stress. We can think of exercise as a form of eustress. It is definitely a stress on the body, but it's short term. Typically, a bout of exercise can last anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour for an average person. So that's a very acute short-term response. And it's a good response. It's a healthy response, right? So that would be a really good example of that, or taking an exam, right? So you're getting ready to go in to take the exam, you enter the alarm phase, you take the exam, you walk out of the class, and you breathe a sigh of relief, it's done.
Yep.
So those would be examples of physical and psychological stressors that initiate the alarm phase. So if we move on to the chronic, or what we call the resistance phase, this is when stress persists. And we could have stress persisting for a few hours, or days, weeks, months, and even years, and that's where we get into real trouble.
Yeah.
Right. During the resistance phase, our energy requirements are going to remain very high. We're going to continue to need lots of energy to deal with this stressor. And that's where we get another hormone that starts to come into the picture, and that hormone is cortisol. And that's a different hormone that's also released by our adrenal gland, and it's again the hormone that dominates during our long-term response to stress. And unfortunately, when we experience stress for a long period of time, cortisol begins to impair our immune function, and that's why people tend to get sick.
Right.
They tend to get colds, upper respiratory infections, colds, even the flu. Um, and that would be short term. But if we continue to see stress over the long term, and we'll talk about that, even more severe impairments can occur. Muscle tissue also very bad. And then for those of us who have very busy lives, if our nutrition is poor, if we get inadequate sleep, and illness can all exacerbate these conditions, right? So if we are a grad student, I remember my final semester in graduate school, I actually ended up in the hospital.
Wow.
Having some pretty, fortunately I was okay, but I was definitely experiencing stress. And that had been stress that had persisted over the course of months.
And would the stress not also impact your sleep patterns?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So you feel stress. Again, your sleep patterns are disrupted, and that further exacerbates. Okay. So that's the chronic or resistance phase. The final phase of the general adaptation system we talked about earlier is what we need to stay alive, right? So the body can no longer cope because the resources have been depleted. And unless corrective action is taken, all of those can result, and in the most severe cases, death can occur as a result of those diseases.
That's scary.
It's very scary. So,
but you're saying that those things that we think of as
that keeping yourself in a chronic stress state can actually make those worse. Absolutely. Right? Because again, the body simply is not able to keep solution. We all experience conflict, and certainly conflict is a source of stress. And when I originally made this presentation, I harkened back to my days as a group facilitator for domestic violence perpetrators when I was working as a batterer intervention program facilitator. And we had to do a lot of work. So I thought I would start there because I think hopefully we all know some of these things, but it can never hurt to brush up on our conflict resolution skills. And whenever I think of conflict resolution, I like to put on my customer service hat, right? And so if you think of what you want when you're a customer, you can sort of put yourself. What do we do to effectively manage a tense or stressful situation? Well, obviously, the first thing we want to do is remain calm, because doing otherwise is counterproductive. Getting mad, yelling, screaming, raising your voice, doing all of that, I know this is actually counterproductive. So what can we do in addition to remaining calm? Whoops, I went the wrong way. All right, so let's think about how we communicate, right? So what can we do to effectively manage a tense or stressful situation? Well, we want to think about using a very appropriate nonverbal communication.
Mhm.
So most of communication is nonverbal, right? So I don't know if you've ever heard the expression, but that it's impossible to not communicate. Because even when you're saying nothing, when you're just being, you're communicating something,
Mhm.
right? So it's important to become aware of our nonverbal cues, what we're telling people without opening our mouth. And that starts with body posture. So, you want your body posture to be as non-defensive and as non-combative as possible. So if I could ask some of our participants, what type of body posture should we avoid, and or what type of body posture should we try to maintain? Anybody have any
Right.
good ideas about
We have
that?
several people in here. If you want to speak up,
Sure.
or those online can either put in the chat or there we go. Thank you.
Yay.
Or let Dimitri know. So anybody in here want to add to the question is,
So what is it in terms of body posture? How do we want to look versus how do we not want to look? What body posture should we avoid
interesting.
versus what body posture should we embrace? So I'll give you an example. So one thing would be to avoid folded arms.
Yep.
Right? I don't know if you can see me,
No.
but you want to avoid folded arms. That indicates that you're closed off. And you don't want to indicate that you're closed off. That indicates closed-mindedness. So you want to be open and you want to be relaxed. You don't want to be tense. I once had a client who was, and I'm 5'1", who was 6'5". And when I asked the group for an example of an intimidating body posture, all he had to do was get up and stand right next to me and look down at me. And that was a really effective example. So, not dominating, respecting personal space, being open, not having your arms folded, not giving the side eye or the eyebrows up.
The arched eyebrow.
The arched eyebrow, right? So those are all really good examples of what you should do in terms of body posture versus what you shouldn't do. And I don't know if anybody else has anything to add about that. Those are just some of the ideas that I have off of the top of my head.
In the room or online want to add to the conversation?
I have seen people point these.
Pointing
the
fingers.
pointed fingers.
Yes, and we actually see that on the slide. Excellent. Thank you. Shaking or pointing your finger. Absolutely.
And
Yes.
I also try to breathe if I want to calm myself. Like,
Yes.
Breathing.
Breathing is
That's
extremely
important.
And we're gonna talk about that for sure.
And I was thinking smile,
Yes.
but if you're trying to do conflict resolution, you may not want to smile. That might give a
Correct. And so we would think smiling, but our smile has to be authentic.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. And I think that's the next slide, which is facial expressions.
And Lisa has said, I keep thinking my daughter rolling her eyes at me. Rolling.
We'll get to facial expression in just a minute. So let's move on to voice, and then we'll get on to facial expression. Right, so we talked about body posture, let's talk about voice. So using an appropriate tone, so not using a stern tone or a defensive tone or an angry tone. Keeping the volume appropriate, right? So not muttering under your breath or shouting at somebody, and using appropriate language.
Oh, yeah.
Which, when you're in a conflict situation can be difficult, but it's really important to use respectful and appropriate language, because to do otherwise, and by the way, culturally appropriate language, let me add that.
Yes.
Because especially here at FAU, we are multicultural. We have people from so many different cultures, and so it's important to remember that our communication needs to be culturally appropriate as well. So does anybody have any ideas or thoughts about voice or language, or did we cover that pretty well?
Yeah, it seems like it's pretty.
All right, so let's go ahead and let's move on to facial expression. And we talked a little bit about this, but what are some good facial expressions that we want to engage in when we are resolving conflict? Well, certainly we want to use appropriate nonverbal communication and facial expressions. We want to nod. Right? We want to give other people the idea that we're listening, that we're invested in them, that we're paying attention, we're not just brushing them off. I'm reading something and yeah, you can tell me, no, if I'm not looking at you,
Mhm.
right, and there's our direct eye contact. But again, and so what Judy was saying earlier, don't smile if you're not happy, right? Smiling is nice, but we want our communication to be honest and authentic. And if we're not happy, we shouldn't be smiling, because
Right.
that says that we're not expressing what we really feel, right? So we want our communication to be honest. I'm not saying that you should be inappropriate, but it's okay to not smile,
Right.
if that's
Yeah.
not what you're feeling.
Yeah.
We want to be honest and authentic. And again, you want to show interest and concern. So again, no raised eyebrows, no wry smiles, none of that side eye. And then eye contact is also important, with a caveat. So eye contact tells other people that we're paying attention, but in some cultures, it's disrespectful to make direct eye contact
Yes.
with somebody who's in a position of authority. And so, especially if you're a professor, you have to be aware of that somebody
Mhm.
might not be making eye contact with you, not because they're trying to disrespect you, but because in their culture it may not be appropriate.
Right.
So again, you have to be culturally sensitive to some of these things and educate yourself about that for sure. Okay. Any other facial expressions? So for the participant who had a teenager, do you get any of those facial expressions?
I don't know if this is a facial expression, but these loud sighs.
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I'm so exasperated
Yes.
with you.
Excellent,
Mhm.
right? And that doesn't do a whole lot to resolve the conflict. Excellent example. Thank you very
And
much.
Lisa, did you want to speak up and say something? We can unmute your mic. Okay, yeah, Lisa, your mic is on if you want to
Thanks.
join in the
Right.
conversation.
And I don't want to take too much time, but one thing my daughter does in terms of the conflict is I'll ask her a question, she won't answer. And so I'll ask again and she won't answer. And so now obviously I'm frustrated because she's still not answering. And then she snaps at me because I'm bothering her and tells me that she did answer and I just didn't hear her.
Uh-oh.
So it isn't necessarily a facial expression. It's the I did say it. I don't know if she thinks she did it in her head or I don't know. But
So that might just indicate, not fully paying attention.
exactly,
And
or
hearing the words, but not having them register in the brain.
yeah. And then of course she spends the next half hour apologizing.
When you're trying to resolve conflict, put your cell phones down.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes.
It's really, we're all tied to those little devices. But again, it's really easy to come across as not interested in or invested in the conversation when you've got a cell phone in your hand.
Absolutely.
So
And
please-
that's and I would say that the visual of talking to someone with a cell phone in their hand is going to depend on the age
Mhm.
of the other person, because for younger people, I don't think they seem to see anything wrong with
No,
that.
no.
And as we get a little bit older, we see it as
Yes,
not being focused on what's going on.
correct. So I thought I would add a little bit in there as well. All right, so let's see. So moving on, so now let's talk about message content. So we talked about body posture, facial expression, voice. It's important that your message be direct and honest.
Mm.
So even if it's a difficult message to convey, be direct. People's time is very valuable. Your time is valuable. And I don't want you to spend 15 minutes telling me something that it should take you 2 minutes to tell me,
Right,
because my time
yeah.
is valuable.
Giving all the background but and then he said and she said but why would I? Yeah,
Right.
I get it.
So being direct and being honest, and again, honesty doesn't mean being disrespectful. You can be honest and respectful,
Yeah.
even if it's criticism, right? So be as direct and honest as possible in your message content. And then lastly, in terms of conflict resolution, again, this is sort of the customer service perspective, right? What do we want to do? We want to try to maximize yes to the extent possible. We can't always do that, but let's see if we can, even if we can't get 100% there, can we get 25% there, 50% there? Can we give some amount? And then to the extent possible, minimize no, but make your case. If you have to say no, make your case, explain why, right? So that the person doesn't seem like they're being dismissed. So again, if you have to say no, be sure to make your case. So at least the person that you're dealing with knows that you gave it a shot, that you took their request or their issue seriously. And then obviously if follow-up is required, you want to do that as promptly as possible. So just some tips for conflict resolution. All right. So in terms of managing our tense situations, and again, just this is sort of recapping our conflict resolution. What do people want, including you? Well, people want to be heard, so listen to them. People want to be assisted, so be willing to help them. People want to feel that they matter, so it's important to show concern. People want to be cared about, so be empathetic. Put yourself in their situation if possible. And then people want solutions, so be a problem solver, right? Even if that means pushing back on the norm. Try to think outside the box and to be a problem solver. So this is just sort of these are some of the many things that I learned in my time as like I said, a group facilitator for domestic violence offenders. Does anybody want to add to how they resolve conflict or manage a tense situation, or what they feel is important in this process? I welcome your experience. Comments?
I just think you definitely have to show understanding,
Okay.
because a lot of times we all have different opinions on things.
Absolutely.
And it can get very heated.
Yep.
But the bottom line is we all have something positive to contribute in the end. So if we take the time and have just that couple seconds of self-reflection, if it does get to the next level, just to be relaxed, listen, and try to resolve it peacefully.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And that sort of goes with managing our stress, which is where we're going to next. Thank you so very much.
And I'm reminded, and Lisa has a comment as well too. So go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, well, the first thing that I thought of was about being present.
Okay.
And when I used to, I'm a former principal of an elementary school. When I used to work with my faculty, a lot of times they would come into my office and shut the door. And it wasn't so much that I needed to have an answer for them, or I needed to, in the moment, problem solve for them or with them, but they wanted to be heard, and they appreciated the fact that I was being present, and I wasn't on my computer, and I wasn't taking notes or trying to multitask. I was looking at them, I was engaging with them, right? That my facial expressions, and they knew that when I said, I understand, that I was being honest. That I understand. I don't have an answer for you right now, but I do understand what you're saying, and I feel badly about the situation, and I will look into it, or something like that.
And Lisa, that's an excellent point. And when I was doing my groups, my clients were male, and males have a tendency to be problem solvers. They like to fix things. And I always told them, and I'll tell everybody here, we don't necessarily want other people to fix our problems. Sometimes we just need somebody to listen. And as we speak, we're processing that, and we're fixing our own problems. We just need a sounding board. So resisting the temptation to get in there and try to fix or give unsolicited advice is really, really important. Allow the other person to process through it and try to problem solve for themselves. Right, that can be very important. So thank you for jogging that, Lisa. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I just want to say something about listening. Listening is really a complex process.
Yes, it is.
And if you can practice clearing out your mind of your story and your perspective and having your say, it will help you hear rather than just listening.
Yes, but how difficult is it for us to declutter?
Yeah.
Right, to sort of push all that aside, but you're absolutely right, because that is true listening. When we take our preconceptions and push them to the side and really hear what the other person is saying to us.
Usually everybody is trying to think of what do they want to say.
And if you're thinking, you're not listening.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Excellent. But I've been practicing this, and it can be done.
Yes.
But you have to do it like in little baby steps.
But you
Yeah.
bring up an excellent point. Good communication, effective communication is a skill that's learned over time. It's not something we're born with. And so I just encourage everyone to practice, practice, practice,
Mhm.
right? The more you do, the better you become, right? And give yourself a break for not being perfect every time. Just try to strive for making progress each time, right? Don't add stress onto stress.
Yeah, yeah. There you go.
Lisa has a comment.
Okay.
Lisa?
Hi, I just wanted to share, there's a wonderful article for anyone who's interested, and I can put this in the chat. It's back from 2004 in ethical leadership. It's called Presence, and it's by Robert Surratt, and it's so wonderful, and it's such a good read, and really does speak to everything that we're talking about today.
Perfect.
Excellent. And Lisa, if you can go ahead and put it in the chat, if you'll also send it to me, I will make sure it gets sent out to all of the attendees as well.
I will,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
All right, so now that we've talked about conflict resolution, let's just do a little bit of stress management. Yes, ma'am. Yes. So at work, and we'll talk about at work and at home, and then in general, you know, if you are feeling really stressed, if it's possible, take a physical time out. Get up, walk around the building for a minute, even if you have to go to the restroom to get away from a stressful situation, that's okay. You know, go get yourself a cup of coffee, some water, you know, if possible, take that physical time out. And if you can't, take a mental time out. Sometimes if we can't physically leave our desk, but we can mentally go to our happy place for a couple of minutes. And that can often be just as effective. Talk to somebody, whether it's a supervisor or a coworker, and then if necessary, ask for help. And how many of us are really good at asking for help? Not many of us.
Not many,
right? We want to be perceived as independent. We want to be perceived as we can do this, we got this. But we all need help, and it's okay to ask for help. And I've gotten much better at that in my older age because I realize the value of it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not an island. I don't have to do it all by myself, right? So try to ask for help. Okay, so what can we do at home? So socialization is critical. So if you look at longevity, if you look at centenarians, one of the things that they have in common is that they socialize. They have a very close network of people that are important to them. And so spending time with people that you love, that you feel good around. So spending time with friends, spending time with family, right? Socialization is crucial. Isolation is what can kill us, right? So socialization is so important. And then doing something that you like, reading, writing. I love to cook and play with my kitty cats.
Yep, me too.
So, Thanksgiving's coming up. I've already got a menu planned. I've got some shopping done. I'm getting ready to go. I'm putting my Christmas decorations up. All of those are things that make me happy and feel good and can help me to de-stress after I've been grading, research papers and maybe, some of them were better than others and, that gets a little frustrating. So, doing something that makes you feel good. Any activity that provides meaning for you and relaxes you. And the key there is meaning, right? So have a purpose other than just being productive, right? It's okay to do other things. And then interestingly, physical activity, we hear the importance of physical activity. And by the way, I'm an instructor, a health promotion instructor in the exercise science and health promotion department. And one of the things that we know from exercise physiology is that low to moderate intensity physical activity clears that long-term stress hormone cortisol from our body. And by clearing that from the body, it can help the body to mitigate some of those long-term negative effects that we experience when we have chronically elevated cortisol levels. So doing, and it doesn't have to be, running a marathon. In fact, we want it to be the opposite.
Right.
We want it to be low to moderate intensity, just something to get you moving, to get your heart rate up a little bit, something that feels good, gets your breathing up, and that is actually going to help to clear some of that hormone from your body. That's what research shows us. So those are some of the things that you can do at home. And then in general, right, how to avoid that exhaustion phase. Self-care is really, really important. And that's physical self-care, mental self-care, emotional and spiritual self-care. It is all connected.
Mhm.
And when any one of those legs is broken, the chair is unstable. So you want to tend to all of those. And I have sleep at the very top of that because that's my Achilles heel.
Me too.
I am a night owl by nature, and I live in a world of early morning risers. And so sleep has been something that I have struggled with my entire life in terms of getting enough of sleep. And now that I've entered a certain age, just falling asleep is getting difficult. But sleep, making time and making sleep a priority, making exercise a priority, proper nutrition, again, those social connections, which are so important, meaningful activities, prayer and meditation. And I'd just like to open it up to ask our participants, what are, of those lists of self-care items, what is the most difficult for you and what is the easiest for you? Anybody want to share what they really struggle with in terms of self-care? Anybody
in
here?
here?
Overeating,
Okay, so
comfort food.
emotional eating,
Yep.
yep, absolutely. Been
Yep.
there, done that. Yes, ma'am.
Social connection.
Making social connections. And by the way, just like everything else, it takes time to do that. I went out to dinner with friends last night because I knew that was important, even though I was preparing for this today. I said I'm going to keep that date because that's really important.
Mhm.
So again, it's prioritizing the things that we know are good for us.
Yeah.
Prioritizing us. We're important. We are important.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And again, and that's our next bullet point, time managing. Prioritizing, and by the way, it's okay to say no to people, right? Again, we don't like to say no, but sometimes it's really necessary. When we have so much on our plate, it's okay to say no, maybe another time, and not feel guilty about that. Okay? And then I have developed what I call an attitude of gratitude.
Yeah.
You know, and some people find keeping a gratitude journal really important. And that can be as simple as every day when you get up, write down a few things that you're grateful for. It's amazing how when you see what you're grateful for,
Mhm.
how your unmet needs aren't really unmet needs, but unmet wants.
Last year, I took a bottle on January 1st, and every time something good happened, I wrote on a little slip
I
of
love
paper
that.
and I threw it in a jar. And then at the end of the year, I opened all of them to see all the good things
Oh,
that happened.
nice.
That is so wonderful.
I like that.
That is so
Yeah,
Yeah.
you could
wonderful.
make the jar all pleasant and nice, however you
Yeah.
want it, and then just keep sticking them in there,
Yeah.
and then it grows.
You know, the old expression goes, it's not what happens to us that matters, but how we respond to what happens to us. And the more grateful you are, the better you respond to those things. So being grateful for what you have and focusing on that can be really, really helpful. And then some activities you can do, and I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. Meditation is a really good way to manage your stress. And by the way, I have these links on a document that I'll email out to everybody, but that's
we'll get
just
sent out to
a
everyone.
link to a YouTube search that brings up a whole different set of guided meditation videos that you can look at. There's also something called progressive muscle relaxation. This is something that's really good to help alleviate stress, and it's good to help you fall asleep. It's where you conversely tense and then relax certain muscle groups. And it helps essentially to release stress and tension in our muscles that we don't even realize is there. So again, this is a link to several videos that you can view to engage in progressive muscle relaxation, and then breathing, right? Really focusing on breath. Breath sustains us, and breathing can ramp down our sympathetic nervous system response, and it can ramp up our parasympathetic, which is our rest response. So we can get rid of our adrenaline and bring about more peace. And again, that's a link to some of those videos as well. Visualization is also really good. Visualizing your happy place, visualizing what you're grateful for, and writing. if you can get some of your stressful things down on paper, hopefully you won't be ruminating them as you're trying to fall asleep. So get them down on paper, get them out of your head. And that helps lots of people. And then again, socialization, taking time. I'm also going to email this out to everybody. These are some of the resources that we have at FAU, including the Exercise Science and Health Promotions FAU Well program. There's Campus Rec, FAU Owls Care Health Promotion, Counseling and Psychological Services. And then for faculty and staff, we also have an employee assistance program that is available to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's the phone number, and you can contact people at any time. And then finally, let's remember
Great
to
resources.
laugh.
Thank
yes,
you.
You're welcome. And my punchlines won't come up, but I'll go ahead and put these. So to steal ideas from one person is plagiarism, and the punchline, to steal from many, is research. Right? So if at first you don't succeed, be sure you try 2 more times so that your failure is statistically significant.
Yeah, right.
And then he who laughs last thinks the slowest.
That would be me.
So a little bit of joking. So just quickly, what was the most important or helpful thing you learned today? I hope everybody took at least one thing away that they found important or helpful. Does anybody want to share what they learned that was useful or helpful?
Yeah, anybody online, you can put it in the chat or let us know and we will open up your mic. And of course, those that are in here with us, join in the conversation.
And if you have any questions, I'd be happy
to talk about stress.
to field any
Lisa?
questions.
She says it's okay to talk about stress.
It is okay to talk about
yeah.
stress.
To admit that you feel
Yep.
stress.
Absolutely.
And need help. That's hard.
I have a question.
Yes.
How she mentioned, but I couldn't get. How you take, like, sometimes you think about what you hear, what they are gonna say to you before. How you do so you can listen, hear.
And that's what we were talking about earlier, trying to get the clutter away.
How can you do that?
What I try to do is visualize a blank board, right? Or visualize a blank space so that the thoughts that are in my mind get pushed to the back. I just visualize, or I stare at something blank or stare into the distance and focus on what I'm seeing rather than what's in my head.
Yeah, because our mind is constantly
Right.
doing stuff back and forth.
So if you can try visualizing a blank space or looking at focusing on a point, anything, right? That's going to help you focus and move that clutter to the
Especially
side.
my husband, when he starts to talk to me, I know what he's gonna say.
That's those conditioned responses.
I need to change.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to thank everybody for your time, your attention, and your participation. This was really awesome. I'm so happy that I got a chance to do this today. I'll email you out my contact information if anybody would like to contact me. I just want to say thank you so much for being with me today, and I wish you all happy end of the semester and happy holidays.
And Michelle, we thank you for sharing with us.
Happy to be here.
It's wonderful, and we truly appreciate this. Thank you so much for being a part of it.
Thank you. I was very happy to be
Thank
here
you.
today, and I hope everybody took a little something away from this session.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.